We'll start the session now. We have our honorable chief guests here, and welcome Rajiv Ranjan ji, welcome Durga Shankar ji. Very good morning to all of you. People can hear at the back, all? Okay, so we start today's session. We are very excited, thrilled, encouraged with the presence of our chief guests and dignitaries on the dais. Thank you, sir, for sparing time and joining with us here. This conclave is part of our agenda on, pushing for change in how the water and sanitation issues are addressed in the country. Today we have a big struggle that we are trying to achieve a big target of providing toilet to each and every household. This comes with also another challenge, that what happens at the back end. We need to address the streams of waste which will come, the environmental degradation which happens. It does come with privacy and comfort and some amount of cleanliness which comes with provision of toilet. These things also need to get connected with the river pollution issues. The river ultimately sometimes what happens is these contaminant, the pathways find its way into the sources of water supply, groundwater, and these are some major concerns. And there is a community of practice which needs to address this issue, which doesn't exist at the moment. So we have a school of water and waste, which is this first school which has come up as a part of Anil Agarwal Environment Training Institute, this facility which CSE has developed. And this is the first conclave to bring together international and national people who would be able to discuss, debate, dialogue, and we would talk about this. School of Water and Waste is the first school out of the 6 schools which we are proposing at the Anil Agarwal Training Center here. And this school is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The first initial support comes from them, and we have Madhu with us here. Madhu, welcome to join us on this group. And we have people from 12 different countries, I should tell, here in the audience. And we have representation from all over India. We have people coming from down south in Kannur and Tumkur. And we have, very diverse group here present in the play. We have from South Africa, sir, on the other side, Desinen Naidu, who is the CEO of Water Research Commission. So welcome, sir. Welcome. And we have Kala Veramurthy, India International Water Association, an old friend and a colleague, and he's Executive Director, the largest international professional network of water professionals. So once again, we have pleasure in hosting you here, and thank you. Arne Pane, sir, old friend and colleague, Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, the largest network, and he represents GIZ, and they are partners, IWA and Sustainable Sanitation Alliance. And we also have a big group of Indian partners which are supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation called National Fecal Sludge Management Alliance. So this is a group of 32 member partner institutions that is being represented by Madhu here, because this is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we also welcome our Director General Sunita here on the dais. So we have today a very power-packed inaugural session. And with this, I would say, I would invite our Director General Sunita to give context setting and why we are all here, and talk about some of the key challenges and issues what we face, Sunita. So.
Thank you, Suresh, and really very happy that you're all here. Lights? Lakwinder ji, sorry, lights one cutting. Mishra ji, what I wanted to do was our effort in this conclave is that we are trying to also join many dots, because we feel that the issue often becomes very silo. And you often tend to look at sewage. You look at water, you don't look at sewage. You look at sewage, you don't look at wastewater. So the effort is to try and open up the space, get everybody together. And I'm really happy, and I think it's very much a credit to my colleagues, Suresh Roila, as well as his colleagues, that we have got all of you on this platform. And this is very important, because our effort is to bring all the major networks so that we can look at where do we stand and how do we work more together in the years to come. So let me begin by explaining to you what I see as some of the big challenges. I've looked at water, sanitation, sewage, but also in the context of what I'm calling the risk of climate change, which is increasing in our part of the world. Some years ago, Mishra ji, I don't know if you saw this, I know that Rajiv ji did. We did a book called Excreta Matters. It was a 2-volume report which asked only one question. Where does your water come from? Where does your sewage go? And you will be amazed, in fact, you will not be amazed. I'm sure it is knowledge that you all know, but there was so little information of where sewage was going. Cities knew their water maths, but they had no idea on where excreta was flowing. And this was a 2-volume report which did city-by-city analysis, which helped to explain what is the state of art, and also suggested that we needed a different paradigm of both water and well as sewage. And the reason is that we essentially found that if there was more water supply, there is more waste. It's a very simple maths. We know that 80% of the water that we get, 80% of it leaves our homes as wastewater. We also know that the more waste and less treatment equals pollution. And we also know that our cities are struggling to build infrastructure to keep pace with water and the disposal and reuse of treated effluent. That is the crisis of pollution. Rajiv Ranjanji here is the head of the Ganga mission, one of the most important initiatives of this government. And what we are dealing with is a crisis of domestic sewage. And we are dealing with it also because we are not understanding this as part of the common challenge we have. And this is not just India, which is why it's good that Desigan is here. This is as much an Africa issue as it is an India issue. It's the pattern and the paradigm of water and sewage that we are adopting in our part of the world. A few months ago, Desigan had invited me to come and speak to water engineers in Cape Town. And this was right after Mishra ji, Cape Town had just missed its day zero, when the city was going to run out of water. But what was very clear to me was that Cape Town was in that crisis, not just because of climate change, but also because of the system and the paradigm of water and waste that it had adopted. And the system is the paradigm is very simple. Cities are getting their water from longer and longer distances today because either local water is not available or local water is contaminated. You cannot get water from the Yamuna anymore because it is so contaminated. You have to bring water, long distance transfer of water from the Ganga because you're looking for cleaner and cleaner water. But the cost of water supply therefore increases, distribution costs increase, losses increase, and cities find it difficult to recover the cost of water supply. But more than that, they have no money to spend on waste treatment. And as I said, if you supply water, you will have waste to take back. But the cost of taking back the waste, intercepting it, conveying it, and then treating it to potable levels. And remember, your rivers today have lost the assimilative capacity. So you literally are at a point where you have to treat the water to near drinking water quality so that the river, you can discharge it into a water body. And this cost is unaffordable. But more than that, the paradigm is one of inequity because cities treat the waste of some which is mixed with the untreated effluent of the majority. And that is why you have such high levels of pollution. So our reality today is that cities are exploding. In fact, they're imploding. And they're doing that without adequate sewage management. And all this means that our rivers are dying because of pollution. There's increased cost of treatment, of drinking water, and degradation of a scarce resource. A country like India cannot afford to degrade any drop of its water. That has to be and is the national challenge. And all this is combined with two other factors. One, climate change, which is today leading to more and more variable and extreme rain events, leading to urban floods and urban drought. You are now getting to a situation where every time it rains, our cities go under, because we are not designing to be able to cope with the water that flows. And what you have is increasing tensions between urban and rural India on the allocation of this scarce resource. The advantage is cities do not consume water. Cities excrete water. We use and we discharge. Therefore, the challenge and the opportunity is, how do you build a new way of doing urbanization, which is water-wise and waste-wise? That's really the challenge that we are all here for and to discuss. So our future tomorrow, and that's the reality I talked about, but the future tomorrow can be vastly different. And that's the big picture we need to keep in our mind as we work on our own field. The big picture is that if you reinvent sewage management, if you can provide sanitation to all, but it is affordable, so that the cost of intercepting and treating wastewater is possible, and so that we design so that we deliberately reuse and recycle the solids and the liquids, we can actually rework a water future for our cities. So you have to reimagine, you have to rework, you have to redesign for a sustainable and affordable future, which is water-wise and waste-wise. The advantage today is that we have come a long way. In the last few years, our realization of our reality has changed. We know today that most of our cities are not connected to an underground sewerage system. They have an on-site treatment system. There are septic tanks connected to soak pits, connected to drains with no underground lining. But this, and this is why we're all here, this is an opportunity to reinvent. This could be the new paradigm for urbanization. And that is why it's an exciting option to look at for the future. Arne is here. Arne was the one, Mishraji, who introduced us to what we call shit flow diagrams. And he was the person who came to see me and discussed, and I am obsessed about shit or excreta. And so when he came to CSE and he said, I want you to do shit flow diagrams. I said, what? But it has really helped, because the shit flow diagrams helps us to envision a city. Because the shit and the excreta is so underground, and as I said, when we did our 71 city analysis, we understood the water supply, but we really didn't know where the sewage was flowing. And what the shit flow diagram has done is to help us to look at the city, city-wide. You have got an idea in terms of the on-site system, the off-site system. You have understood if the excreta is collected and how. How is it transported? How much of it is safely disposed of? And today in India, I was asking Bitush. Bitush told me that India would have at least 500 to 600 shit flow diagrams now done for different cities. Dinesh is here. He has done excellent work looking at doing shit flow diagrams. There are many others. So now a lot of this mapping has happened. When my colleagues, Suresh's team worked on UP, and we came up with these two reports on septage and cities of Uttar Pradesh, and an assessment of the excreta management, doing it through the tool of shit flow diagrams. What really came out is, Mishraji, and that's, I think, a very important revelation, and this is true for most regions of India, that 70% of the state of Uttar Pradesh is what you would call on-site, which is that I have whatever you may call it, anything from a well-designed septic tank to a tank, to nothing more than a hole which is connected to a drain, but it's on-site. We also found that 80% of the septic tanks are connected to open drains where the liquid is discharged. 50% of the septic tanks are mechanically cleaned, so 50% are not. 90% of the septic tank waste, and septic tank is in quotes because these are not well-designed septic tanks, is not treated, is disposed of in drains, rivers, and land. So this is the all UP shit flow diagram. This is now combined for UP, and you will see that green band which would show that the waste is actually being transported, conveyed, and then to some extent treated. It's such a small amount of it. And there is also in some cities like Lucknow and a few other old cities where there is some semblance of a sewage network. So this is the picture, and if you look at the shit flow diagrams for state after state after state, you practically get the same thing. 73 to 80% of the sewage is flowing into open drains, it is not collected, it is not safely treated, and that is the crisis of pollution today. But this is what excites me. I mean, when I saw these charts 2 years ago, I actually got really excited because I saw this as an amazing opportunity to reinvent completely. Because in some level, if these systems are far more cost effective, you're not building underground sewerage, which is, when I did our book, Excreta Matters, it was 1 crore a kilometer. I'm sure it's gone up to 5 crore a kilometer now. You don't have to, you also have to think about it very differently that people are managers. If the septic tank is overflowing, people will get a backflow. One of my solutions, Rajiv ji, has always been to the Ganga pollution, that you put a plug on every drain that flows from a city into the river. Okay? Let there be a backflow. Let every drain flow into the city. Then people will know what sewage is all about. Why should the river get our sewage? But here, people are managers. This is not in my backyard syndrome. You can actually make sure that the system works because people will make sure it works. And you don't have to re-engineer the entire city. You don't have to do underground sewerage. You can actually build a far more nimble system. And why this is possible is because this is what the world is doing. Just think about it. All of us today have mobile phones with us. I am of a generation which actually had to go to somebody very important in government and get a connection for a phone because it was a landline. Today we have all moved to mobile phones. We have all changed the way we actually do communication by getting rid of the landline. The energy system is talking about doing rooftop energy systems. So why in the case of fecal sludge, why in the case of sewage can we not skip, leapfrog the landline system in which you laid the pipes before you could get sanitation? You could think about it, and you are thinking about it, we are all thinking about it, as a completely different future. So what is this conclave's agenda? I want to lay down some of the questions I have. And I want some amount of discussion, and I'm hoping over the next 2 days we'll have that discussion so that we have a clear idea how we move forward. My first question is, what is the right legislative framework for this on-site system, for on-site sanitation systems? Because currently, actually, if you look at it, we have the Environment Protection Act and we have city bylaws. What is the best municipal bylaw system which needs, because you have an urban policy. The urban policy is a good peg. But what is the actual legislative framework you provide for sanitation management at the city level is something that we need to learn from cities, what's happening, what's working, and then come up with the right model that we can adopt city after city, state after state. Because without it, you will not have the deterrence, you will not have the compliance that you require so that people will be within a framework, a legislative framework that they have to do this. The second question is, what is the best practice and the business models in transport and in conveyance? A lot of work has happened here. Here, I think I'm not so worried. I see a lot of cities having actually worked on doing this and not focusing first on improving every septic tank, but really thinking about first, what is the best way for me to gather the waste, to make sure that the waste is transported, and that there is some amount of pricing for the use of that system. What is that? And that's something we want to discuss with cities. Come up with a framing that what is the kind of best model that is coming up? Do you charge for taking the waste to a waste treatment plant? Do you charge for collecting the waste? How do you ensure that the tanker which collects the waste from your house doesn't go and leave it in the next open field that they have? A lot of cities have done a lot of work to improve compliance. So that's our second area of work. But our third area of work, and I think that's where the real weakness in the system is, what is the treatment system for this? We know that there is right now happening treatment with co-processing. We know that there are treatment systems being built. But when I've looked and I asked for a price range, and I'm somebody who determines everything based on prices because affordability is very important. I find the price range for an FST system ranges from $0 to $1 zillion. And you can't do that. I mean, no, the price range is pretty large. Madhu, I've done the, I'm not talking about very expensive systems. I'm talking about the range being very large. And the range is very large when we put different systems together and we looked at what is the price. But the point is, and maybe you're right, maybe it isn't, but the point I'm making is there definitely needs to be much better understanding for cities to do DPRs on these FST systems, what will be the right system. But the system that I really want to ask is, what is the best treatment system? What will it cost? And in this, there are two questions that we need to ask. One is the question on, and I think that's going to come up in the next 2 days, what do we mean by fecal sludge? Because a lot of the systems are designed so that liquid and solid is actually mixed. A lot of the systems are designed so that the solid is separated from the liquid. The characteristics of the waste change enormously, and that's why the question becomes, how do you design a treatment system which is capable of handling a lot of this? Next, on the third day, we are going to be spending a lot of time understanding each one of the treatment systems the cities are designing and understand the inlet parameters and the outlet parameters that are getting designed. And the biggest question is, how does the sludge and the effluent discharge, what are you designing your system for? Are you designing your system so that, like a conventional sewage treatment plant, you discharge a treated effluent onto water and you keep the solid sludge on the land? Or are you designing your system very differently for reuse, and what is that? And that, to me, is the other part of the very exciting part of this agenda. The fact is, current sewage systems are water-based systems. You take a little bit of human excreta, nitrogen and phosphorus, you flush it using water, you convey it using water, and then after treatment, your disposal is also water. And this destroys the nitrogen cycle of the world, because we eat the nutrients, we excrete the nutrients. The use of that nutrients back on the land would be a perfect circular economy in which you were returning the nutrients back and you were enriching the soil as well and building for much better nutrition of human beings. So this is the real option that exists with these systems. How do you reuse and recycle and put it back on the land? And this is where I think the maximum work, Karthik is sitting here looking at how to use compost and excreta to make pellets for energy. But this is where the big scale up is possible, because this would then mean that you have fixed a lot of the urban problems. You're not polluting your rivers, you're returning the waste back on the land, you are actually doing something substantially different than the conventional sewage system. So the last 2 points I want to make is that as we do this, and I think that's going to be at least CSC's focus, is that for us it is a city-wide sanitation approach. And the outcome is the quality of the river. So we need to measure and monitor what we are doing for the entire city. And the bottom line has to be that it's affordable sanitation for all, that you're intercepting the sewage of all. And that's where we need to break the silos. We cannot only say it's only septic tanks. If there is other sewage, we need to intercept that as well. So you need a city-wide approach. And the ultimate answer has to be, does it clean your river? Does it improve the quality of life? Does it make the waste into a resource? And that's, in my view, very much possible. This is really the agenda for the next 2 days that we have. We deliberate on what is possible, how can we make it work. We learn from the experiences and the practices of many people who are working on the ground, and then see how can you upscale it, replicate it, build it into government policy, because that's the scaling up that we all have to work towards. It's government and government policies, city policies, which will really make the scale up possible. Because finally, let's be very clear, we all live downstream, and your waste is my water. And that's really got to be the message for our work on SFT. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunita, for the powerful message and setting the context. Now we have Water Research Commission CEO Desinan Naidu. He is representing Water Research Commission, which is a partner institution of CSC. We work under the global program in South Africa. And I should tell you, they have also gone through a major crisis. South Africa was Cape Town was the first city to go dry, and people really started rethinking that can we. So, and also other thing is that they are also the country which has taken lead from the SFD work, what we are doing in India, and they have decided that across South Africa, they would do shit flow mapping or excreta flow mapping, if I am allowed to use this alternate term. And we partner with them, and we are also working in how we can address the issue as together water and sanitation is seen. We have a partnership with Water Research Commission on water sensitive design and planning. And my friend Jay, who is here, he has said that why only water sensitive? Why can't we sanitation sensitive design and planning? So this is a very interesting thing. So we connect with water and sanitation. We cannot talk separately. And Desinan, here invite you to share your experience. How did you save the city of Cape Town? And how can we learn from this experience and the SFDs and many more things to come? Thank you.
Your presentation, I know, is loaded.
Lakinder, Sunita, हम लोग कर देंगे, आप बैठिए, सर की presentation बोल दी।
Go back to where you were. Yeah.
This one?
The second. There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much. Good morning to our host Sunita. Good morning to the government guests, and good morning, colleagues. And thank you very kindly for the invitation to come and share both our experiences, but more importantly, learn from the other experiences here this week. And thank you for inviting us to your lovely campus. It's quite amazing. And if you needed any reminder about why we need to have this discussion, you should look over that wall, because on the other side there's a homestead, and this morning there was a young lady carrying a 20-liter bucket of water on her head, which was a stark reminder of what it is possible here inside this campus, and what is the reality out there that we have to work on. So I want to share a few thoughts with you, lessons from Cape Town. Khokhas, which is a lovely South African term for insects and other invertebrates, and unicorns, because this has become one of my more recent obsessions. So to begin, I think that the zeroth lesson, the one that's not on the slide, is that you should always listen to the scientists. Because the Water Research Commission and the community of practice of water scientists in South Africa have been telling the city of Cape Town since 1990 that there will be a day zero. It took a long time for it to materialize, but it did eventually. And this meeting and this conversation between the science community and the policymakers and the practitioners is something that we have to put a lot of effort into. But Cape Town has become the poster boy or girl of water scarcity. Because I don't think before Cape Town it was envisaged that a city, which is the wealthiest city in Africa, as it happens per capita, could ever get itself to a point where you could contemplate a day zero. There are many day zeros in my country, all over the countryside actually, but in much poorer towns and districts and cities. But for Cape Town to have gotten to this point, I think was very sobering. So the first lesson, if anyone did not know that before, is water is extraordinarily scarce. One of the things that we have borrowed from our colonial powers is the notion that the world will operate like Europe. That notions that we will borrow from the developed world and implement the solutions is something that we have to re-examine very, very closely. And one of the slogans that I've been walking around with for the last 6 months or so is that we're trying to solve 21st century problems in the world in the domain of water and sanitation and so many other things with 20th century technology, and even worse, with 19th century operating rules. And this is what Sunita was talking about around the legislative and the regulatory environment. But in the domain of scarcity, one of the things that we have to examine very closely for ourselves is whether or not we're going to organize for ourselves to plunge into this spiral, this vortex of catastrophe. And just taking from the things that are out there in the predictive literature and also in the popular press, there are various predictions of the nature of scarcity over time. The end point being something that I don't think we argue with too much right now, is that by 2050, 1 in 5 countries in the world, let alone the developing countries, will in fact be water scarce. And this is quite astounding. And we're not talking about those countries that are in the belts of water scarcity because of their geography only, but even well-endowed rainfall countries will be in a similar kind of situation. But maybe the water discussion at length is something for a bit later in the week and maybe in other conferences. The thing that I want to concentrate on today is that a second lesson that came out of Cape Town, and I think Cape Town should be regarded as global, because there are many Cape Towns in South Africa, there are many Cape Towns in Africa, and there are many, many Cape Towns in India, is that the sanitation crisis is actually festering under a very thin cover of the global SDG preoccupation. Now this sounds like a terrible thing to say, because there are loads and loads of people putting a lot of resources into organizing themselves to get towards the SDG goals. And it's clear that in every single region in the world, great progress is being made. Every region is organizing to get a little bit closer to the 2030 target than it had been before. And then in India, you and I were watching the budget speech together, the Open Defecation Free India project seems to have remarkable statistics. I mean, to get to a point of 98% coverage as it was announced in the finance minister's budget speech is truly astounding. You know, we may grumble about whether or not the audited numbers will see out the 98%, or will it be 95%, or will it be 92%. But to get from where you were to where you currently are is inspiring the rest of the world. It's saying that something is indeed possible. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge the nature of the deficit. You know, the first of the deficits is around the access, that we have a huge access deficit in the world. The current numbers are still talking to 2.2 billion people and 4.5 billion people in households that don't have close access to the convenience of a toilet. But going along with that is the services deficit, because it all works in an ecosystem. The health deficit, and something we talk a lot about in South Africa, and that is the dignity deficit that goes along with a lack of sanitation. and it is truly intense. And we've been examining this in various ways. You know, we have projects around water-sensitive design, we have projects around these should flow, these excreta flow diagrams in the system, because as a diagnostic tool, it is truly quite amazing. As a marketing tool, I have seen its power. The ability to get people who do not ordinarily want to talk about excreta, examining these diagrams and now talking shit is quite astounding. And we should use the power of this. But we should go a little bit further, I think. You're going to spend the rest of this week, and you're a highly capacitated group of people, talking with great intensity about where to next with the FSMs, or as you call it in India, the FSSMs, yes? And I will leave that to you, because that's where the expertise lie. But I think we have to expand the envelope a little bit. So beyond the regulatory tools, beyond the legislative tools, should we also be re-examining what the business model is around this? Because the feature for the past 2,500 years, because that's how long we've been using waterborne sewage in the world, is a public sector model. Public sector, public sunk cost in the system means taxpayers' cost. Is it time to liberate ourselves out of that? Now, one of the ideas I've been playing with in the last couple of months is this idea of a Sanicorn. I like it very much. And I'd be happy to give you a lot more about this when we're sitting down in dinner or something. But the idea that you could reorganize the business model around how we deal with sanitation in the world to give us the possibility of the world's first sanitation unicorn is an aspirational idea. And a unicorn, as you would know, because this is a very regular India conversation, is a startup company that manages to get itself to a revenue turnover in a single year of $1 billion or more, and applying this into the sanitation space. And it's an idea that actually has conversation under many guises in many, many different places. This is a picture of two folk, at least one of whom you will recognize. That's the guy on the left, of course, who is the president of South Africa. The guy I might need to remind you about is Bill Gates. He's the other guy sitting on the right. But this idea is being discussed in many, many places around not only solving the sanitation problem of the world with the change of the business idea, but actually creating global sanitation-based industry models that were organized to be mechanisms to actually grow economies. And it's an intriguing idea. And in the South African case, we're talking about something very new being the center of that. And SAFE is the school sanitation program. It's called Sanitation Appropriate for Education, because everyone needs a good acronym. And so the idea of the school sanitation program is that this sanitation program can be the nucleus around a broader idea that we've been playing with in South Africa, and in fact shared during the Chennai conference of the FSM a couple of years ago, the idea of sanity, or the Sanitation Transformation Initiative, the new sanitation idea, which in turn organizes itself not only for sanitation security at town level, but also water security at town level, and you can easily see this. And that in turn organizes for a national industrial revolution idea. And the different components of the business case gel together quite smartly. We sit in the realm in the world where there are currently about over 100 partners gathering under the banner of the Reinvent the Toilet program that comes from the Gates Foundation, where we have come up with some good science, some very good technology, and some amazing products that allow the realization of all of the things that Sunita has said. That the future that she speculated about us being aspiring towards is actually possible already. That we have systems that can operate on dry sanitation or very little water. We have systems that can organize for very smart on-site treatment of the sanitation waste. And we can do it in ways that organize for a series of products that have genuine profit value. So in addition to this market of 2.2 billion people that you currently have around the world, that is your first market for this new sanitation, because currently there is nothing, and making sure that we don't organize to reach those 2.2 billion people on the technologies of yesterday, so that we need another effort to get them to the technologies of tomorrow, and organizing to think that we should be working towards the 2050 initiative, the so-called 10 billion initiative, when there'll be 10 billion of us on this planet, and that deficit will grow from 2.2 billion to a much larger number. In addition to all of these, there are the possibilities that come out of the industrial products from the on-site sanitation, treatment. Maybe the biggest one, and the one that has the largest numbers associated with it in the short term, is of course energy. And like your country, we have a number of examples, and Kala might talk to you just now about the much broader network of the IWA, because there are examples all over the world of organizing to start with simple things like biochar, moving to the biogas exploitation that comes out of sanitation waste, and going even further, to quote some of the work of Karthik, around organizing to pull out the fats and oils so that we can possibly have a biodiesel industry that comes out of the sanitation waste. So the possibilities are very interesting. They're very large. And yes, they do need to be prioritized. But it's time for us to organize an expansion of the thinking so that we can start embracing all of this in a serious way. There are other very interesting value adds. I'm not going to go too much into that. And I think there's some space later on in the program where we can unpack some of these in more detail. But making the case for $1 billion a year industry actually has become quite easy. And not on tomorrow's technology platforms, on the technology platforms that already exist today. And this is an idea that we should capture and start running with. And in South Africa, we have done some things in the government space to help us along this road. So one of the things that we have is a national industry policy framework. And the national industry policy framework has in every year a revisiting of the priorities in something called the Industry Policy Action Plan, or IPAP. And the 2017 version of this included as a priority water and sanitation, very specifically new sanitation. Now, what this means in the South African context is that this provides the prioritization for all the public agencies that co-sponsor the development of industry. We're talking about the Industrial Development Corporation and the Public Investment Corporation and a whole range of instruments around that. So it's actually quite a powerful tool. So moving a little bit further, the fourth lesson that comes out of Cape Town is that organizing around a very old practice of certain units sitting in government and a technical base of professionally trained engineers and practitioners is in fact sufficient to manage the water and sanitation system in the world. It is not. It actually never has been. And so the idea around expanding these teams and empowering the people around us to be able to participate in these teams is in fact the only way to go. And here is an example that we've been playing with in South Africa now for the past 15 years, and it's actually become a global phenomenon. And this is where the khokhas come in. And that's around organizing for citizen science to become a real phenomenon in the world. And this example is a very interesting one. It's called Mini SAS, and SAS is the stream scoring administration system. It is in fact a water quality assessment system that anybody can use, starting from little kids in pre-primary school, looking at the khokhas inside the system and doing an examination of the invertebrates to give you an idea of the health of the river, to the most sophisticated end where people are in fact doing PhD and postdoc work inside this domain. And you can do this, Sunitha. You were talking about the river health being one of the primary markers around how successful we are with sanitation. Well, now we have the toolbox that allows anybody to be able to do so. So for the folk who are in the homestead behind us, with a toolbox that can actually make at home, because all of this can be downloaded from the internet and you can construct this yourself, then organizes for people to have a real assessment in real time around what the water quality status is in the water body that's closest to them. And we've become more sophisticated around this. We have embraced the tools of the fourth industrial revolution. We get folk, usually school kids, to then organize for their data to go to some central point where the data is analyzed. We put them on GIS maps, and everyone can see what they contribute to and download what they need, and hopefully use this very practically. So the idea around creating a global, much enlarged water and sanitation team in the world is not only desirable, it has also become very possible. And the next lesson is that we really have to empower the ecosystem approach. And this is absolutely critical, because we begin all of these seminars without fail by talking about coordination, by talking about integration, by talking about synergy, by talking about sharing, and then we spend the rest of these workshops falling into our streams, into our comfort zones, and then expanding on either that practitioner base or that science without actually revisiting the concept. Now, we have to make this very real. And one of the things that helps us to make it real is that sanitation has a really, really good model around being the center pivot of a circular approach to the water sector as a whole. Now, I'm not going to go into any kind of detail around this. There are experts around the room whose work on this has in fact inspired me, but it's now time to reorganize our models so that we are able to engage this into practical ways on how to move forward. And the should flow diagrams, in fact, become a diagnostic, not just for sanitation in a city or a town. It is part of the diagnostic of the state of the environment in that town. It is a part of the diagnostic around the state of the industrial model in that town. It is a diagnostic around the state of the socio-economy in that town. So my invitation to you is that in the rest of the discussion in the rest of this week and moving further on, because we're going to have many of these events all over the world, is to see whether or not we can expand on this concept, expand on the idea of the toolboxes that will empower the different components of this, and maybe organize for us to be inside the kind of futures that Sunita was talking about. So colleagues, that's what I have to share with you this morning. All of the work is also supported by bunches of reports that are available to you free of charge on the internet from the WRC workshop, website rather. And I thank you very much for this opportunity, Sunita. Thank you.
Thank you, Desinan, for this inspiring talk and telling us about how you dealt with the crisis, and also indicating something that, you know, we should learn from that, how we can reinvent the cycle, and, you know, circular economy would be the way forward. Now I would like to invite Kala, who represents IWA. IWA is a professional, international association of water professionals, and it has a renewed focus of mainstreaming good practices in water and sanitation in India. And we are also thinking of, you know, collaborating with IWA in this direction, because technology does offer some solution, and IWA does bring together the technology professionals. But I think there is also a way that how technology and global south, what is affordable. With that angle, Kala, if you can throw some light.
Good morning. Let me just quickly. That's okay. This one? Okay. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, Sunita and Suresh, for the kind invitation. IWA is extremely happy to be attending this event in this extremely beautiful location. It's the first time I've been here, and congratulations to CSC for building such a wonderful facility. What I'd like to talk to you is to give you a more broader presentation on some of the challenges that we see in both the water and the wastewater and sanitation sector moving forward, and how we see changes taking place within the water sector. And really, you know, this is reflected in the work of our members. We have around 10,000 members within IWA who are doing quite a lot of research, and this is really a reflection of the direction of travel that we're observing. So when we look at the challenges moving forward, we just launched our most recent strategic plan just last year in Tokyo. It's very clear to us that the problem is really on the waste side. Okay, most of the innovation on the drinking water side is there. Of course, there are lots of challenges in terms of delivering good drinking water systems, but 85% of the waste that we generate are not being treated. And it's not only in areas that we expect, like South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, but also South America, parts of Central Europe, and Eastern Europe. You still have problems where we're not dealing with this fairly toxic material that creates huge environmental issues. Of course, we have really ignored at our peril the whole area of non-sewage sanitation, which the majority, particularly in the developing world, are experiencing. And we have not in the past, and now you're seeing some very good research and implementation taking place, but historically this was a very neglected space and it was ignored. And so you had fairly, you know, not very elegant solutions to these problems, and they were quite dirty and they were not very efficient and very ad hoc. But now you see much, much greater attention being paid to non-sewage sanitation, and we are slowly seeing very elegant solutions that are becoming quite cost-effective. And also this opportunity that Sunita mentioned about recovering value from our waste streams is potentially giving us an opportunity to sustain the sanitation delivery chain from some of that revenue that we're generating. There has been quite a lot of work being done in this space, and you know, from my perspective, I think this is where really the focus will be in the next 20 years. I think the next 20 years will be the golden era in terms of wastewater and sanitation. You see huge investments taking place in Asia, both in China and in India. You see Sub-Saharan Africa having a big interest in the deployment of both non-sewage and sewage sanitation systems. And in terms of non-sewage sanitation, there's been a lot of developments, and you know, organizations like the Gates have been instrumental in pushing some of this innovation, but where we're starting to adapt very systematic approaches to the design of these systems. They're no longer becoming ad hoc, but they're actually being engineered in quite an elegant way. And you're seeing decision makers in some of the utilities who were very fixed on always going for a sewage approach, slowly starting to appreciate that actually, you know, a non-sewage sanitation is probably more appropriate for my context than having a sewage system. And you get lots of decision support systems. Now, when you look at where we are with wastewater treatment systems, we have not really engineered them very well, particularly for the developing country. And as Desikan said, we've tried to take Western approaches and deliver them in developing country context. This is work that was done in the organization that I used to work for, which was EMI, where we looked at wastewater treatment systems in Ghana. And here are the number of treatment systems that exist. But when you actually look at the ones that work, you can see there's a huge variation. So we are there building these systems. We're using very much Western approaches, Western ideas. We're not really understanding some of the challenges with operating these systems and maintaining these systems. So they're not actually engineered particularly well. And this is what is resulting. But what's interesting for me, coming from a developing country myself, is that, and working a lot in the developed world, is that when you look at wastewater provision in the developed world itself, you know, the last 50 years was really like a pilot study, right? They started to build very clumsy systems, huge grey infrastructure systems, which were over-designed, and they iterated over the last sort of 40 to 50 years. And now you're starting to see some optimization taking place in this space. And you're seeing innovations, particularly in changing the physics of these systems that are reducing the overall footprint of these systems. They are reducing the energy cost associated with these systems. And you're seeing technologies that are really making these systems much more efficient. But in the developed world, they don't have the capacity to adopt this because they have so much legacy infrastructure. But I think for the developing world to try and capture some of these very interesting innovations that improve the settleability of our sludge, for example, that allow us to increase our loading rates in our digesters by heating them, heating our sludge. These types of innovations are really potentially going to allow us, if we do go for conventional wastewater treatment systems, to develop them in a much more innovative way and contextualize them much more for our conditions so that we have small footprint, low energy type systems. And I think there's a huge opportunity. So I think both in the non-sewage sanitation, you're seeing the evolution of very elegant and efficient systems that are coming out, but also in the more conventional wastewater space, I think there are these opportunities. And of course, you know, in many of our emerging economies, so for example in sub-Saharan Africa, this is a diagram, it's a bit of an old diagram, but it shows you concentrations of GDP, which is where the big cities are in the world. And you can see that Africa, a continent that is urbanizing very, very fast, doesn't have currently these large cities, and it's because it is villages that will become towns that will become cities. So if you were to look at this map in 30 years' time, on the continent of Africa, you will see lots of these mountains because cities will be emerging. And so the question, as I think Desigan pointed out, is that do we apply 19th century approaches, you know, these very linear systems that are highly energy inefficient, centralized systems, or do we go for something a little bit more elegant, a little bit more clever, either non-seward or seward, but understanding where we are currently in terms of technology. Now, when I think about decision makers and what they are struggling with at the moment is, it's really, you know, the status quo is not an option. As was pointed out earlier, there are lots of global change pressures that we are experiencing. Of course, there is climate change that is affecting, you know, our water resource availability. It's both in terms of quantity and quality. It's affecting, I'm sorry, both in terms of too much water and too little water. It is affecting us. But people, you know, populations are growing, particularly the urban populations. And these populations are not only growing, but they're growing up. And so their rate of resource utilization is also increasing. So we cannot continue to run our systems in the way that we've done before. And what I see working with water professionals is that they are currently struggling intellectually. On the one hand, they recognize that they have to develop smaller footprint systems much more consistent with a more circular economy approach. So their ambition is to transition to moving away from these linear systems where you treat water to one quality, you use it once and throw it away. They're trying to move to a sort of more circular economy, a holistic view of viewing the water cycle. But they recognize that the future is plagued with huge uncertainties. So actually they don't know where they, you know, what is going to be available to them in 20 to 30 years' time in terms of, say, water resource availability. When you start to look at the predictions that we have, you know, you start to have this cascade of uncertainties as you move from a GCM model to your hydrological and water resource models at the ground level. And so they recognize that there are huge uncertainties. So on the one hand, they want to transition, but on the other hand, they don't really know what the future looks like. But then the reality is that they have to make decisions now, okay? And when you are implementing infrastructure, you implement it not for 1 year or 2 years, but for 30 to 50 years, right? So you're putting things in the ground today that you know have got to last for a long time. You would like to move to a circular economy approach. You don't know what the future is, and so what you tend to do is you just replace old with new, and you reinforce the old paradigm. So what we see is that we see this lack of capacity to escape this very inefficient sort of centralized approach to water and wastewater. And so this is really a very, very difficult time. And I think the way in which we train decision makers is still very much in the old sort of, you know, modeling and number thinking. And they lack that creative, the right brain type of thinking, which is really needed now to cope with some of these challenges that we face. When you look at the changes in what's happening, the first major change you see is the way in which we view water. We're starting to now think about an increase in demand, and we're starting to think about, you know, can we create different grades of water? Can we use water multiple times? And water can be treated with some and be used for irrigation purposes. You even see some very innovative processes where wastewater is being used to dilute saline water so that the cost of, say, reverse osmosis or desalination gets reduced. So really clever ways in which to use water multiple times and use different grades of water for different uses. But the key to doing that is to have a very holistic view of your water cycle. So you don't look at your drinking water separately, your wastewater and your stormwater separately, but you view the cycle as one, and you look at all waters that flow within that cycle. And you recognize that all of this water is good water. It's just water of different qualities. And you start to say to yourself, right, for certain types of demand, where should I put my investments in terms of water? So if I have demand for more drinking water, then the question will be, do I pump more surface water? Or can I invest in, say, leakage reduction, which is actually high quality drinking water? And that frees up more drinking water for me, or water conservation. If I want to water my plants, then can I use my grey water or my treated black water for that purpose? So when you start looking at the entire water cycle as one, you start to be able to do water balancing. And this is quite a major shift in the way the water sector views water flows. And critical to this is modeling. And this is where you try to connect the dots. So you try to connect these different flows for these different uses. And what you start to do is invest in efficiencies as opposed to investing in new infrastructure to move water. And you see a lot of developments in this, and you see modeling where people are starting to model packets of water, and those packets have signatures in terms of the effort that was used to produce that water, what are the qualities of that water, and then you can start doing this matching of that water for that need. This is an example of some work we did some time ago in Nairobi, and you can see the traditional engineering response to growing demand was just to find new surface water, right? That was the traditional, you know, left brain thinking, right? But once you start looking at water in its entirety, you realize that there are lots of flows within the system that are going to allow you to meet that growing demand without actually investing in new infrastructure. And you can start to see that you can bring the unit cost down of water by investing in these efficiencies. And of course, if you start doing things which are more exotic, like treating black water, then the price of water might go up. So these models really allow you to recognize where you should put your investments, okay? It tells you. And of course, it's not only using sort of grey infrastructure type technologies. Natural systems can play a huge role in closing the water loop. So you can protect your water bodies with vegetation, eco-hydrological approaches. You can use things like river and lake bank filtration to treat your water before you get into supply. And then on the wastewater side, you can use things like, you know, constructed wetlands coupled with soil aquifer treatment to polish your water before reuse. And these systems have much greater adaptive capacity and can manage shocks much better than grey infrastructure. But of course, there's a land requirement associated with these systems. And the energy cost is low. So what I was really talking about is very much a systems perspective, right? You start to view your urban water as a system, but actually water is a system of systems. And the city is only one user. But once you start looking at your entire watershed, you start to observe opportunities to do clever things. So of course, as an urban person, we tend to optimize our urban system. But we see that there are these synergies that take place between these different sectors. And so if we start viewing the watershed as one, we can actually start to develop solutions where we're investing in another part of the water cycle in order to reap benefits within our own water cycle. And I always say in a country like India, for example, the urban water sector and the ag have to be like brothers and sisters, right? Because the synergies, the benefits of them working collectively in terms of reducing the overall water footprint and also using nutrients that we can recover from our waste streams is huge. The other big change you see in the water sector, of course, and it was talked about a lot, is the way in which we view wastes. And it's not just our wastewater or our fecal sludge, but there are lots of other waste that we can combine to produce various types of products, right? So it's actually thinking about how we can co-digest or co-utilize lots of the waste streams to produce, you know, both energy, both water, because a lot of this is water, and then things like nutrient recovery. And again, viewing the water cycle as one allows us to understand where within the water cycle there are opportunities for us to recover, say, for example, energy, where it could be upstream. And I know Water Research Commission has done work in terms of microturbines in the drinking water side. But then, of course, if you have sewers, you have opportunities to recover heat. But also, if you have elevation on your side, you can generate energy through turbines. And then, you know, either in a decentralized or a centralized approach, you can generate energy. And then nutrient recovery through, say, FSM, big opportunities for nutrient recovery, but also within your treatment works. The biggest challenge, though, in that space of resource recovery and reuse, and it was mentioned earlier, is that we don't actually fully understand the business models. What we tend to do is that engineers talk about how much of something they can produce. They say, I can produce so many tons of fertilizer, but they don't really understand if there's a market for that, right? And they don't really understand what their competitive edge is against other fertilizer producers. And so what's really important for us is to shift a little bit of our thinking, again, the creative side, to understand that if we produce these fertilizers, who are our customers? And what is our value proposition to them? And what are the costs associated for us to channel that value proposition to those different customer segments? And what you find, and we did a lot of work in EME on this, we find that a lot of these systems currently don't work. You know, they work when there's risk capital supporting them, but when that risk capital is withdrawn, they are not sustainable. So it's still work in progress, but clearly this is the direction that we have to move in. But the business models are quite complex. So this is an example of a business model where most people, this is where you precipitate phosphorus from your waste streams to produce a fertilizer crystal. Now, most people believe that what's making the money from this whole process is the sale of these crystals. They think that because they're producing fertilizers, they're making a lot of money. And this is deployed in big plants in the United States and in Canada. The largest wastewater treatment works actually in the world, Stinkley plant has this. But actually the money is not being made from the fertilizer. Most of the money that this company produces is because they remove phosphorus, which precipitates in the pipelines, in the return activated sludge lines, and it blocks the pipes. So they reduce the maintenance cost for that wastewater treatment works by removing the phosphorus. Also, they're reducing the nutrient discharge for that particular wastewater company. So most of the money they make is from those two elements, and then they make some money from the sale of the crystals. So you have to understand that it's much more complicated, the business model, than just saying, well, I can produce a lot of fertilizers and I can make a lot of money. And we still don't fully understand the nuances of these business models. And they are very context specific. If you have very tight regulations, then there's a lot of funding to sort of protect the environment from nutrient discharge. But if you're not enforcing your nutrient regulations, then clearly, you know, you wouldn't be paid in that same way for that. So again, understanding context and the business models is key. What we're finding now is that this idea of thinking about the productive use of water and looking at how to recover resources, the language in the water and sanitation sector is changing. We are now starting to not talk about water treatment, wastewater treatment. We're starting to think about machines. Machines where water is actually the feedstock. And it can be water of different grades coming from different sources. So it can be water that's already been used. It can be water that's coming from the surface or groundwater. And this machine, with various types of technologies, you turn the handle, it can produce waters of different qualities for different users. This machine can produce energy, either in the form of heat or in the form of energy. And this machine can produce nutrients. And people are now starting to say, are we actually designing an energy machine where water is a byproduct? And if that's the case, what type of technology should we use? Where should that machine be located? And if we're trying to primarily produce nutrients, again, what type of technology and where should it be located? And what this is, these are some examples, I'll skip it, but what you're finding is that when you're trying to do these clever things with water, size starts to matter, scale. Water is quite heavy, so if you want to reuse it, you don't want to move it long distances and then move it back. So these centralized systems don't work very well for these clever things. And what people are finding is that if you can create these decentralized systems for populations of around 30 to 50,000 inhabitants, you can do these clever things. And what's interesting is that if you have emerging areas, populations that are growing, then you have this adaptive capacity. You can slowly start to grow your services over time. You don't have to invest in large centralized infrastructure, but you can add modules because you're dealing with decentralized solutions. So it gives you a huge adaptive capacity. I'll skip this. I just want to go on to an IWA, by the way, we have a program called the Water-Wise Cities, which talks about some of this. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is there's a lot of innovation taking place, and you see this with the Gates work on toilets, on fecal sludge management, on wastewater, but the rate at which this innovation actually gets deployed is very slow. This is an example of some work that was done. You know, this is the Canby process, right, which is a thermohydrolysis process, which I mentioned earlier for reducing the viscosity of sludge. The original paper was published around 1978, 1980. But really, it only started to be deployed around sort of 2006 to 2008. So there was a very big time gap, nearly 25 to 30 years before that technology really reached practice. And that was when the tipping point happened, around 2006, 2007. And that's really, frankly, very, very slow. And there are lots of new innovations, particularly in the area of non-sewage sanitation, in the area of toilets, struggling to sort of really take off, right? And so we have to think about how we can improve the rate at which this innovation is being taken up, or the rate at which accelerate the diffusion of innovation. And I think that we tend to think, and now I go again back to the sort of the grey infrastructure that we have within the water sector, we tend to believe, and this is some thinking from a colleague of mine, actually he's our vice president at IWA, Sudhir Murthy, we start to think that the water sector, the wastewater sector, is full of elephants. And elephants are animals that have very long gestation periods, so there's a lot of thinking done before you start to deploy them. And you have this correlation between long gestation periods and long lifespans, right? And we tend to think that our water systems are basically elephants, right? They'll be there for 50 years. And there are reactors and parts of our water system that are elephants, but also we have horses within our system, right? These are the pumps, the mixers, which have much shorter gestation periods, and they have shorter lifespans. And then we have what you might call the hares or the rabbits, which even have much smaller lifespans. These are the control systems that allow us to manage the stoichiometric chemistry of our flows and of our systems. And it's really a combination of this that exists within a water system. And it's really the horses and the hares that allow you to repurpose your elephants. So even though you have elephants, to think that you can't do anything is wrong. Because if you modify your control systems and you start to modify the physics of your systems, as I said earlier, you can start to repurpose some of your grey infrastructure. And so we have to recognize that we are not just dealing with elephants, but there are elements in it. And this is from where Sudhir used to work at DC Water, where they had a very, very old system, right, full of elephants. But they started to deploy these technologies, mainly these horses, mixing devices, you know, the Canby process, that changed the physics of their processes so they could increase loading rates, increase the efficiencies. And so what they could really do is to repurpose the elephants and get efficiencies. But the key to this, right, is to really decouple the way in which we think of our structure. We tend to think of it in a vertical, so the elephant sort of dominates everything. But if you start to decouple this and think of it more in a horizontal, and the people that procure the rabbits, the people that procure the horses are independent of the people running the elephants, then you can constantly innovate. So this idea that we are conservative because of elephants, I think is really wrong. But it's the way the culture of the sector is, right? That we tend to let the elephants dominate. But really the big opportunities for us is to look at outside our sector for control mechanisms and digitization, look outside our sector for the mechanical devices that improve the physics of our processes, and that really allows us to improve the overall efficiency of our systems. And of course, in these emerging economies, you would avoid at all costs putting in a lot of elephants. So you would go for more package plants, you would avoid building large concrete infrastructure. I'll finish, right, by saying that, you know, I always finish with this slide. We are in a sort of a situation where we can stay in the lane as business as usual, which clearly, with all the global change pressures we're facing, is not an option. We can try harder, so we can still build these very clumsy systems and try to optimize them as far as we can, but that's not going to give us the needs that we have, right, in terms of meeting the supply-demand deficit. We can really shift to a totally different approach, where we start to rethink the way in which we use water, the way in which we reuse water, move towards a more sort of circular economy approach. And I think we have to really be in that lane. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kala, for this talk. And now I'll invite Madhu. Madhu represents Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She is the country head for the WASH program. And she also spearheads National Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance, which is a consortium of 32 organizations. We at a national convening decided to come together and push the agenda to the next level and, you know, push for advocacy from moving from sewage to sanitation. And Madhu, you'll talk more about it. I don't want to take the meat away from your talk.
Sure.
So,
Thanks.
and CSC is an active partner of the NFSM Alliance. And your presentation? Yeah, that's here.
Thank you, and thank you to Sunita, Suresh, and CSC for hosting such an important workshop. And I also want to thank all the speakers who went before me, who have informed us so well about how the world needs to change. And I'm very happy to be here both as a representative of the Gates Foundation, as well as for the National Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance, where we are one member. So we're not a patron, but we're one member of that alliance. India has actually embarked on this journey so well that I'm here to actually speak about how India has been thinking about very progressively handling its non-sewer challenges, or the challenges of fecal sludge management. So I want to quickly go through our journey. Do I just press this? How does this go down? This one, okay, sorry. So actually the government of India, when we started working with them way back in 2014, we held what we called the Reinvent the Toilet Expo in March as a Gates Foundation initiative at the invitation of the government of India. So way back in 2014 and 2013, there was already a lot of realization that new technologies, new solutions had to be brought to the country. And when our co-chairs spoke to the government of India about what they were thinking of investing in, which was new paradigms of how to look at sanitation technology. And while we are called the WASH program, I do want to clarify we are very much focused on sanitation, and within that urban sanitation, because we believe that's where the challenge is going to be, and that's where most of our poverty alleviation efforts have to focus on. So at the Gates Foundation, we really focus on urban sanitation and looking at how we can make those solutions come forth today. So when we started working then very earnestly in 2014 with the announcement of the Swachh Bharat mission with the government, we found a very receptive audience, both within our partner group as well as with the government of India. And in partnership, actually we've developed a lot of this work that the government actually took ownership for. So we had the advisory note on septage management in 2013. And from that, the journey kept moving. We did the first one, national workshop, taking India beyond ODF towards fecal sludge septage management. And very happily in 2017, we were one of the first countries to actually announce a national policy at FSM4. And then from that, we've gone on to talk about the Swachh Sarvekshan, which now has more than 11 indicators only on fecal sludge management. And it really hits on a lot of points that speakers before us have talked about. For instance, a lot of people talk about putting citizens at the center. We heard about citizen science from South Africa. And the Swachh Sarvekshan is really that. There's a huge amount of weightage given to citizens reporting on how their cities are actually performing on sanitation. And the Swachh Sarvekshan is tribute to that. And over time, the government has increased the weightage for fecal sludge management. So citizens actually report on how their cities are doing on this. So how did we get here? So as Suresh mentioned briefly, we came together as an alliance of partners who were concerned about the issues of fecal sludge, non-sewer sanitation, about the fact that little attention actually had been paid over the last 150 years on households that actually had on-site systems. And so we engaged very directly as a group of partners with the government, both at the central level, at state government level, where there are a lot of partners already were working with their governments, and city government level. So it was a complete partnership where the government looked to us to provide some technical assistance and guidance, and they were ready to come forth with their policies. A little bit about the alliance. As Suresh says, it's a group of 28 member organizations, now grown to 32. It's technical agencies, behavior change communication agencies, specialists working in the FSM urban sector, multiple channel partners, private sector partners. And the idea is to drive consensus among people who work in urban sanitation and are concerned about issues related to fecal sludge management, related to the shit flow diagram that we know looks quite horrible right now for India. And then creating a collective voice around that to provide technical assistance to the government. We work on all aspects, from city sanitation plans to regulatory institutional frameworks across the sanitation value chain. So very much part of the agenda of the Swachh Bharat mission and now the ODF Plus and Plus Plus mission of the government. We work very closely. Our closest partners are the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and we were helpful in passing this policy. So we are very proud of the fact that the government took up this policy and took up this issue in right earnest, not only in terms of the policy, but also in the funding commitment, both from the national government as well as from state governments. And of course, as I said, we work directly with the government. What's our agenda going forward? And a lot of this discussion has happened. One is to integrate all of the work that has happened in the last 4 years, both on ODF, but also on FSM, all the commitment, within a new national urban sanitation policy. A draft was submitted by the Alliance to the ministry, and they are now actually looking at it, consulting on it, and hopefully we'll have a draft, a policy soon. Around procurement advisories, we have a lot of work happening now on creating the decentralized infrastructure that Kala, that Mr. Naidu and others spoke about. There is a lot of appetite, both from city governments as well as state governments. So we're looking forward to continue to scale some of these solutions and also bring in the innovation as it comes along. And as you said very rightly, Kala, if you work on decentralized solutions, you have the opportunity to leapfrog, to innovate, and quickly scale solutions. You don't have to wait with a lot of legacy infrastructure. And the way that people are designing the FSTPs today allow for new innovation to happen. So as long as you have some basic treatment, you can continue to innovate. We're also encouraging, because we have a lot of idle STP capacity and we don't have the connections, we don't have the last mile connections, we may not have the water velocity that we need to get those working. So there is a policy that allows for co-treatment of fecal sludge, provided the technical capabilities are there within the STPs to accept that load. And based on that, based on a systematic assessment, that agenda is moving forward, and many states have actually made great progress, especially Tamil Nadu, and now Maharashtra is on that journey as well. Quality assurance mechanisms will remain a challenge and continue to be work that we will focus on, as well as creating the enabling environment and the capacity building. I think you're very right that new engineers need to know about what are the innovations that are available, what are possible, get some of that right brain thinking, hopefully institutionalized, and you know, the work that CSE and other partners do on training, I think is a long way in that space. A big agenda for at least the Gates Foundation, and hopefully for most countries, is around the citywide inclusive sanitation. That is, how can you plan so that your cities actually include the urban poor and women? Instead of starting from the center, actually look at the fringes first and see how you can be most inclusive. And at the Gates Foundation, World Bank, many other partners have come together to actually push this paradigm. Because we've had too long a time where everyone's at the second thought, that you think about the urban poor after you cater for everyone in the center of the city. How about we reverse that process and make sure that people who live on the fringes actually are counted first? Because if you do that, you'll actually have much more systematic, circular economy kind of solutions than we have today, right? Because you actually have to think about them. Exactly to Sunita's point, if you think about the backflows, everybody does, and when you say everybody's living on downstream, we know that the urban poor live at the downstream of everyone else, first and foremost. So let's fix their problems. Women, we know, are always excluded. We just heard from the NASA experience where spacesuits weren't designed for women. They never expected women to go to space, so the spacesuits weren't designed for them. We also know when cars test for crashes, they don't actually design them for women. So women actually suffer more injury because the safety gear is never designed for women. So how about we start designing city sanitation systems for all genders equally? Let's put women in there. You don't have spaces for them that are safe. You don't have enough toilets for them because there are special needs. So citywide inclusive sanitation is a paradigm shift in itself, and we all need to get behind that, including when we do FSM systems. Okay, so safety gear should be for everyone. FSTP should be those that can be run by both men and women, right? And services should reach everyone. And when we say equitable, it doesn't necessarily mean you divide it 50-50. You actually see what women need and design for them. I've already covered that. And absolutely, the private sector is such an important player, not just to bring innovation, but actually to provide sustainable sanitation services. If our desludgers stop working because the systems don't become operatively profitable for them, we will all feel that very quickly. So we need to make sure that the ecosystems we create actually enable greater private sector participation, as well as due diligence on how they're operating. So they need to also be able to provide equitable service across the city. We have some examples. Hopefully people are going to talk about them in later discussions around innovations like scheduled desludging, which are both innovative, are easy to manage, allow cities to govern how they actually desludge, and also make sure that they bring it to the right places for scientific treatment. So there are many such innovations happening in India. Hopefully, our partners will talk about them. And definitely it's very important, we believe, to have strategic communications to talk about this. Other than this room, people don't talk about fecal sludge. If you talk on the road, nobody actually knows this is a big problem, especially if you live in cities. And how can we start talking about it in a way that it gets attention? I think CSC did a great job with air pollution. We hope they'll put their minds to it and get people to stop talking about it. Because eventually, and we were talking about this in the morning with Mr. Mishra and others, is keeping a city clean, keeping a river clean is an everyday process. And it requires every citizen's commitment to do that. A government will come and sweep your streets, but if you go and litter the next hour, that's not going to stay clean. And the same holds true with rivers, and the same holds true with our septic tanks. If we don't get them desludged, they're not going to get emptied. So unless citizens stay engaged in this process, understand what their commitment is, governments can only do so much. So that's a big part of the Alliance's commitment this year, is to make sure we engage with citizens in a way that makes sense, makes resonance, and keeps everyone accountable, both governments as well as citizens. And that's kind of our game plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu, for this message and the action plan from the Alliance. And we have Secretary who would tell us that how he wants to take this agenda forward, and also Director General NMCG, who would also, we would expect that he will tell us that how some of these things could be integrated into their action plan in the coming years. Now we have Arne Panisher from GIZ, and he also heads the Susanna Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, which is an informal group of individuals and institutions, and he will tell more about what this group comprises of. But I should tell you, Arne, when we started 3 years ago with the SFD thing, and I purposefully kept your talk at the end now. We come back to, we have talked about diverse aspects, water, technology. Now we are coming to the thing. And as yesterday we had a review meeting, I think we are witnessing that there are almost 1,000 SFDs across the world which are being created. Now let's see the power of this tool. And in India, at least I can tell you that if 2 secretaries are present on the dais, the purpose of the SFD, which was an advocacy tool, and which, Madhu, I should tell you that this was supported by Gates Foundation, that it was an advocacy tool to change the focus from sewerage to sanitation. How far we have succeeded and what is the way forward in that. And in this 2 days, we will discuss in every stage of the sanitation chain that where are the interventions and the urban funding required to move the agenda to the next level. Arne?
Thank you, Suresh. Let us get this first. Yes. Good. Yes, Secretary and Director Mishra. Sunita, great that you make this opportunity happening. Colleagues, friends, I didn't expect this to be such a romantic morning. Dizzy, and is it gotcha? So what is it? These insects, and is it, you call them gochas. Okay, so they brought me to India 30 years back, gochas, because I had a request that from the then GTZ, there was a program strengthening the central and state pollution control boards. And I was studying with a professor who was an expert on gochas. And in Germany, we have the small cards that from the insects you can know the water quality. So in India, that was less developed, and the idea was to develop that. And so I did an MSc study and collected material at JNU. And, but my hidden agenda was to review all the literature and to make these cards and allow for analyzing gochas in India. And then I ended up making a big library providing the library with the review material from India to have these cards as well as part of the central and state pollution control boards. And I'm happy that this is the broader picture, what we're looking into it, bringing it all together, the rivers, the gochas, and the shit. And the other thing, I wasn't thinking that I'm going 30 years back, because I was thinking I can go like 15 years back and tell you that we achieved a lot together. And that's, okay, where do I go here? Like this and like this. Yes, here we go. That's when in the team I was in the ECOSAN program 2004, then the State Secretary of State Uschi Eid was selected to be part of the United Nations Secretary General Advisory Board on Water and Sanitation. So the ministry asked us, well, now do some ideas. How can we help Uschi Eid to do good things? And I remember walking from the canteen to our office and throwing wild ideas. And these are some of them. We should have a great network on sustainable sanitation. 15 years back, we should have an international year of sanitation. That was a dream. It wasn't something you will easily get. There are so many water conferences. There are so many conferences on, well, let's say sort of big treatment plants, but we should have a conference on sustainable sanitation, which is focused on non-sewer sanitation. That was not at all in the reach 15 years back. And a Bollywood movie on toilets would be really cool. And that was really a dream. And I can tell you, 15 years later, we have all that. We've come together a long way. And we have the opportunity here now to look into the future and to have wild ideas and wild dreams, and maybe they become true. And one thing that UNSCAP didn't take up but left it with us was sort of, I wrote a concept of a network. And they said, well, we support that network, but it's not UNSCAP doing it. And that's then finally we succeeded. There's the Prince and now King of Orange. We all worked together to get that international year. So when the international year said, okay, now there will be such a buzz and so much rubbish will happen just to do some infrastructure. Now we have to define what's sustainability in the sector. And that's when we started the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, which was then bringing together a vision paper, and that's similar to today. Let's discuss and find out what is sustainability around sanitation, and let's all come together and discuss that and go along with that. A thought that was highly controversial 15 years ago was we should move from linear to reuse-oriented approaches. Just after my MSc thesis, I went to the Swiss Water Research Institute, EAWAC, and I was sitting with my fellow student, Jörg Lange, and the publication is from '96, where this idea was spelled out, and the discussions were, you are ignoring health. How can you talk about reuse? It's not possible. We shouldn't do it. Today it's mainstream. I'm so happy to listen to Desigan, to Carla and others, and to see that. And so we've really come a long way regarding the discourse. Another thing that came as well from EAWAC was that let's talk about sanitation systems. Let's not talk about just toilets. Let's not talk about just treatment plants. Let's stop the discussion, is it sewered or non-sewered? Let's talk about sanitation systems, look into these elements, bring these system elements along a sanitation chain. That was new, it was a quite new discussion. And the first 8 Susanna meetings, we were sort of the sounding board for a publication which turned out to be the compendium of EAWAC, which brought that together. Again, this today is simply mainstream. So that's as well what we achieved in the last few years together. And actually then at Susanna we said the SDGs are catching up with Susanna, because our vision paper and our principles were say, look at the chain, look at central and decentralized systems, and that's what we sort of discussed in the MDG area, which was more focused on access and on toilets, and we said we have to take into account the whole system. And we were lucky that as well, again, I think all the Susanna partners and beyond worked for an SDG around water and sanitation, and we got it, and it's now sort of looking at the full system. And it's a similar discussion actually in India from ODF to ODF plus and ODF plus plus. ODF is more sort of on the toilet side, but to get it really done, you need the plus and plus plus. And it's very positive. We formed then the Susanna India chapter. I think it's a small contribution, but it's the contribution in that spirit to go from ODF to ODF plus and plus plus. And then I was out of the sector for 5 years being country manager for India and had many things to do. And when I came back in 2014, I saw this at a conference. And that was the first time I saw a shit flow diagram. And I was saying, wow, that brings it all together. It brings together going along the chain, it brings together central and decentral systems, and it brings together in a very easy to understand format, something goes right and something goes wrong. So I said, I want to have a controlled explosion of the shit flow diagram on the Susanna page. And the inventors said, okay, let's do that. And the Gates Foundation said, we would be ready to support that, and that was great again. And this is the one you can see from Shantanu and Beatrice, you did that during that project. And then we got a request some, I think 2 years back before Christmas saying that, there's Bill Gates is meeting Moody and please, he wants to have a shit flow diagram, and that's the one we provided. and then there was the discussion between the two, so that when Bill Gates met Modi, they were using actually the shit flow diagram to discuss the broader ideas of how to tackle sanitation. And yes, Bill is definitely a big supporter of this broader view on sanitation. When an SFD was not in his presentation in Beijing, he specifically said that, I want one. So it seems to be clearly a great tool. There's one thing I want to, and that's very much in line with what we heard from the earlier presentations. There are a number of words that I would say there's now about 80 reviewed ones, which sort of are quite to the quality. And you're right, the diagram and the thought is taking up very fast and broadly. You see the red dotted line, and you see that this is, you can see solid biote waste, its collection, treatment, utilization, its feces, urine, gray water, and rainwater is the blue column. Actually, the shit flow diagram is only addressing the thing in the line with the red dotted line. So it's not addressing rainwater. It's actually as well. It's just telling you where the excreta goes, and it's an excellent door opener, but I'm coming back to the presentation saying put it into the big picture. It's the door opener, but then we have to go back to the big picture. Similar with fecal sludge management. It's again sort of the middle line. It's not looking about solid waste management and rainwater, usually not. It's limited regarding the broader idea of reuse, and sometimes, as you can see from the different technologies which are depicted there, these technologies are cross-cutting. Actually, you have to look at organic waste and fecal matter together. Then it makes sense from a business model view. So you have to be broader. And so my summary, oh yes, the India sort of context. There's an excellent policy framework, and I'm happy to hear that this is now revamped, taking in some of the new ideas. Already the old city sanitation plans that we did were addressing from access, water, wastewater, and as well organic waste. So it's possible with the existing framework, but it's good now if it's improved. But my summary would be, we have to put it all back into the big picture. And that's why I think, Sunita, great that we have the opportunity here to discuss that, put the SFD and FSM into the broader picture, understand the sanitation ecosystem in the context of the Agenda 2030. That set of goals is not too bad. I think it's and create and define the set of tasks and jobs along the mosaic of sanitation chains. We had the business models, and I think what is an idea is think from the end. What's the product that has a market value, and how should I select the different system components that it will give me that product? And that's maybe how I should design part of a sanitation chain in a given context. Yes, and we need the funding mechanisms, and then we need the capacity for the workers, the planners, consultants, banks, and policymakers to get the whole picture working. And I think that's something I'm looking really forward to the week to go on with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anil, for taking us through with this story of SFDs and, the Susanna network. Going back to what we started with Sunita's presentation, that Excreta Matter and few unresolved questions and, various issues that we were talking about, that there should be a convergence between, sanitation and the river pollution efforts. And it's also very important to see that today is the real convergence, at least at the governance level I'm seeing, that we have two concerned people who have Ministry of Urban Development, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and Director General Namami Gange National Mission Clean Ganga, both us here on the dais, and real convergence starts also that when we start talking to each other. And we have now one of our guest speakers, Chief Guest, Rajiv Ranjan Mishra ji, IAS. He is the Director General Namami Gange. He has been previously associated with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and he is an alumni of IIT Kanpur. And sir, we would like to hear from you. And we have a existing partnership. CSC has partnered with Namami Gange program to support them in mainstreaming fecal sludge management into river pollution abatement efforts and, improving the river health. So this is another dimension, Madhu, which will open up the entire focus, that where earlier focus of Namami Gange was only on centralized sewage treatment and conveyance systems was with the ministry. So Durga Shankarji, we were talking about the real convergence starting here, both the people on the dais, and then that was the agenda 3 years ago. And what Sunita was saying, we were trying to link river pollution with, dots which were missing. So Rajiv Ranjan ji, we look forward to hearing from you.
No presentation जी, no
आपका presentation
नहीं कोई presentation
अच्छा तो फिर बोलिए
presentation नहीं है तो सर का भी नहीं होगा presentation तो इसलिए चलता नहीं कुछ श्री DS मिश्रा जी Secretary Housing and Urban Affairs, Sunita ji, Mr. Naidu, Mr. Kala Vairava Murthy, Madhu ji, Mr. Panesar, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my pleasure. And then Suresh was just now referring about convergence between the two ministries, or sir who is here and me. So there is lots of areas of convergence. In fact, both of us are, he mentioned about IIT Kanpur. Sir was my senior in IIT Kanpur, so both of us are actually from IIT Kanpur graduates. And then
but
I was...
Just let me interrupt you. The center, Anil Agarwal,
Yes.
is named after an IIT Kanpur alumni.
Good. I would have told that, but I was just trying to establish that connection. So you have already told. So, and another connection was I was part of Housing and Urban Affairs till a year back and working with sir only. So lots of things we have done together. In fact, joining of this service for people like us, he joined few years back, and then his batch was a kind of motivation that many of us also wrote this exam, and then we joined this service. So anyway, now coming back to the topic, it has been really excellent experience for me hearing from so many experts, so many learned people, and then people who have really worked in the sector for years together, and that commitment to the sector, the commitment to the subject, and their work really shows when they talk about it. So I would briefly talk. And I was really very happy to see about, I was going through the agenda of the workshop, and I saw in the concluding session, perhaps Sunita ji is going to talk or going to have a discussion about convergence between river pollution and urban sanitation. So that's actually the real theme or the kind of mandate which I have in my present job as the Director General of National Mission for Clean Ganga. So I would like to really discuss little more about the river. We talked quite a lot about urban sanitation, so I would like to take you a little bit to the National River Ganga and then its system, and then how urban sanitation becomes a very, very critical sector which we have to work on to really rejuvenate this river. There has been a lot of discussion about the urbanization, the growth of peri-urban area, and then the kind of importance of water sector, and then how urbanization is putting pressure on the water sector. We are all very quite familiar. When it comes to the SDGs, there has also been a lot of discussion about sustainable development goals. So actually primarily what today we are talking about SDG 6 and SDG 11, how they can be convergence between various things. And very rightly so, Sunita ji right in the beginning talked about climate change. So if I talk about Namami Ganga mission, the kind of mission it is, or the river conservation mission, it has a bearing upon many of the SDGs and the way we work, and if we succeed, which it has got a lot of momentum now, so it will have an impact upon all of them. And in fact, if you look at Sustainable Development Goal 6, I think one of the slides someone showed from MDG to SDG is a lot of difference, because that was more about supply and making things available in the MDG. Now we are talking in a much more holistic way. When we are talking about SDG and the water sector as a whole, some of it is still talking about basically making safe and affordable drinking water for all, access for equitable sanitation. But if you look at it, there is also talk about some of the other things in this SDG, talking about water use efficiency, talking about restoring water-related ecosystem. So there is a larger picture which emerges in the SDG 6, and that we have to keep in mind. And these are some of the goals in SDG 6 which also becomes very relevant for a river rejuvenation program. So that's again something which is important for all of us to know. When this Namami Ganga mission was launched, it was conceptualized as an integrated river, and river means Ganga here, Ganga conservation mission or rejuvenation mission. And integration is like, this is not just limited to Ganga, it's limited to, it extends to all its tributaries. That becomes very important when I come to the, what we can do with the fecal sludge management and where this mission is at present and how we can, Suresh told that we can perhaps say what more we can do together, so that would be important. When we looked at this mission, first we concentrated upon the mainstream of Ganga, and then we looked at the previous missions or the previous approach also, and then what we tried to do little different was, we again looked at what you people have been talking about, why don't we look at a kind of city-wide approach. Let's look at, first of all, we tried to map the cities along Ganga, so we selected 97 cities to start with. I mean, that's the kind of cities which are within 5 to 10 kilometers from the river. And then we started looking at mapping the way you are mapping, what is the status of sewerage. And when this started in 2014-15, I think the talk was more on sewerage, and later on the narrative has started changing, and how we have changed that also will tell you. So then we realized, as has been also pointed out by many of you, that we create infrastructure. There was one very typical slide that you may have so many plants, but how many really run? I mean, one of the slides was very clearly showing, you go to the next slide, suddenly the graphs come down very dramatically. So we also realized that under various programs, so many STPs, big and small, were constructed, but they were suffering from lots of issues. I mean, either some of them were defunct, so we got analysis. Some of them were working. There was nothing wrong in the STP, but it was working at a very, very suboptimal level. An STP of 100 MLD will get a load of 20 MLD, 30 MLD. So working at 20-30% capacity only. So that becomes another concern. Because ultimately it does not work. It does not mean that the sewage is not getting, untreated sewage is not getting into the river, because they are not coming to the STP, but they are getting into the river through some other channel. So our problem remains. So we looked at that kind of situation. Then we also tried to look at the citywide approach for sanitation, and then we said, okay, let's not just construct new STPs, let's first look at what could be rehabilitated out of the existing, what is the total gap, and then what we can do with the new thing. And one thing which we added was, we put operation and maintenance of these plants. Anything which we will sanction, we took it policy decision that maintenance and operation and maintenance will be part of the project, so that to sustain it. Again, our basic approach is to see that the untreated sewage does not get into the water body. That was the primary objective, so we wanted to do that. As we progressed, we also tried to improve further and went into private investment, how we can get private investors interested into these kind of projects. And actually, for the first time in Namami Gange, we started PPP on wastewater treatment through hybrid annuity mode. Constraint of revenue or money was not the prime mover for that. What we thought, that if the private party invest their money and BP only 40% during construction and 60% they get as 15-year annuity, perhaps it will be ensuring that the performance of these plants, because they have to recover their money, and only when they will be giving the output to the quality which is prescribed, then only they will get their payment. So I think that sustainability will come. So that kind of approach came. Then we also looked at some of the major cities, let's say Kanpur, Prayagraj, these cities we looked at, and we looked at, let's go for a kind of one city, one operator model. Primarily again, I mean, we have been systematically moving for the city-wide thinking and city-wide approach, which is getting further broadened and further widened today in the light of today's discussion. So what we did, we surveyed that particular city, we already had details, so we said that what is the gap. So we will give a contract, the new capacity, whichever is the gap, will be created. The old asset, if there is any kind of rehabilitation required, they would also be rehabilitated. And then as a result of that rehabilitation and the new capacity, whatever is the total infrastructure which will be coming up, entire infrastructure will be operated and maintained by one operator. This happened in Kanpur recently. And then we rationalized, like many of you may be aware about Sisamo Nala, that was 140 million liters per day sewage was going untreated for decades. So that was transported, that was intercepted and diverted to 2 of the existing STPs, which were running at the suboptimal level. So that kind of balance could be done. And now that one city one operator thing also has gone. When we were looking at all of them, and when we were looking and analyzing about how to utilize the capacity, we also noticed that many of the peri-urban area, like these STPs may be in the densely populated places, there is a lot of justification, but lots of peripheral area will come, lots of new colonies come. So I think we have capacity here and we don't have those kind of thing. And then fecal sludge management, these issues also came up for discussion. So we started looking at present many of these STPs, we are going to have an action plan and we are already working to have co-treatment. So when we look at fecal FSSM, fecal sludge and septic management, and how we are integrating into Namami Gange program, because see, the STPs have been constructed since years, and we have also sanctioned, and most of the places, now we have got 151 sewerage projects running, 112 on Ganga, and then last year we also went upon some of the tributaries, so I think they are also there. So co-treatment could be a very good thing, win-win thing, because we will be through co-treatment, people will also get trained about FSSM, and then we have an MOU with CSE. Last year we had an MOU, and then we have been working as per that. So I think, ma'am, you have such an excellent infrastructure and knowledge base. So we look forward to that kind of thing happening, and maybe taking it to these through co-treatment, and then also some of the new smaller towns along with that. So I think that kind of cluster approach we will have to look and then really carry it forward. Co-treatment helps us because the septage, which otherwise would have been just thrown unauthorizedly into some drain or water body, will come to the STP and get treated, and then our STPs also have enough capacity at this point. I will share that we have constructed these STPs, or we have sanctioned them, keeping in mind 2035 demand. So I think there is a lot of excess capacity will be there in these STPs, so I think we can work with this co-treatment for quite some time. But as we all know, this is a huge work. Ganga and all its tributaries will have to deal with a large number of urban local bodies. So there are number of possibilities, number of smaller towns, number of places where now we need not go for sewerage infrastructure, and there is possibility of straight away going for FSSTP. And then as a kind of model project, we have taken up with Chunar along with your assistance. And that is where we realized, and then there are some of the people who are from the municipal corporation, etc., they will realize that often the transportation of septage becomes a problem because monitoring of it becomes a problem. So I think in Chunar and the other places also which you people may be doing, that integration of good IT-enabled, GPS-enabled transportation plus the treatment plant, all of them should be integrated. So we are actually working at a kind of citywide vision, and we are now trying to integrate different types of solutions, like it can be sewerage treatment plant, it could be FSSTP, and then recently in the Kumbh, we actually experimented a lot of a kind of multiple solution for dealing with that challenge. We had a very huge congregation, I think the largest congregation of human beings which took place in Prayagraj this year. And then the challenge was, see, the one advantage is where I think we have one officer who worked during Kumbh here from Prayagraj. Samuel is here, now he is Municipal Commissioner Bareilly. So he was CDO there, so I think he was part of that team, and we had a lot of interaction. See, what we looked at, Prayagraj was always a priority town under Ganga thing, and different projects have also sanctioned, and Namami Gange, we have 7 STPs which have been constructed over last few years. So we completed them fast, but we realized that everywhere you cannot have the STPs. So there is a lot of what we have been discussing since morning about off-site and on-site. Lot of on-site treatment was taken up on a war footing, and then 53 drains were actually taken up for on-site treatment and different technologies. NIRI was very much involved, and then bioremediation, phytoremediation, all kinds of things were done, which resulted in actually ensuring a much better quality of water, and of course very close monitoring. The UP government and the scientists and other people were involved. So that actually a very good example that if we put a kind of because these problems are very complex, you have to really put in place a large number of solutions to really get the results. So I think that's happening. Now, from now onwards, what I feel we would be doing with the help of CSE, we'll be looking at lots of tributaries and towns on tributaries, where actually still there is a huge gap in treatment. Ganga mainstem, most of the projects have been sanctioned or they are under execution. And that is where actually we have to take this agenda of FSSTP. Now they are also supported by ministry guidelines in Housing and Urban Affairs. Amrut Mission also, sir, will be covering them in greater detail. It's permissible and they are going to support it in a big way. Wherever possible in the Ganga towns, we can also do that kind of work and then take it to the municipal commissioners. Before I end, one or two things I would like to flag, and then I really take this opportunity of presence of Secretary Housing and Urban Affairs also. See, we have been doing all these projects and we have been bringing lots of these issues. But when we look at the really integrated sanitation solution, as well as today there was Mr. Kala made a very good elaborate presentation on how we can integrate water management. See, because it's water, it's rainwater, it's sewage water or wastewater, all of them have to be put together and we have to come up with a kind of plan. And then that is where the agenda of the river becomes very important. Some time back we had a conference where we actually discussed with the urban sector. See, it's very important for survival of the river that there is a good interconnection between river and people and river and city. And river and people interconnection will also happen if the city starts owning it up. Often what happens, we all know that most of the cities and towns, they actually all grow on the bank of river. But slowly the habitations improve, the population keeps on increasing, and then lots of other activities will take place. And a day comes when sometimes the river gets forgotten or lost in the river, in the city, because city becomes so huge. So I think that should not happen, and then we should actually take the advantage of presence of river and make it really livable, use it as a good public space. So those kind of things should be there. And unless the master plan or unless the bylaws you talked about in the beginning about policies, some of those things. So those things should also look at river as part of the city, rather center of the city, and then plan as per that. And that's where we have actually come up with a concept and we are trying to develop as urban river management plan. Now that plan will certainly look at the sanitation part. That plan will also look at how can you get some more conservation of rainwater, and so that the river also gets back some water. And also riverfront, how you can actually improve riverfront in an ecological way so that people have a connect. And then how we can protect the floodplains. Often what happens, floodplains becomes no one's land and no one really looks at it, so the garbage and the other things, they get thrown. Sir, when you had conducted that January meeting with all the municipal commissioners, sir had conducted a meeting with all the municipal commissioners of Ganga towns, and some discussion, that was very good thing, because solid waste management got flagged for all those commissioners, and then they started looking at the river also becoming very important, and that convergence between us is really helping us in moving in that direction. In that interaction, I could see many of the people were not really, the municipal commissioners were not really thinking about river being also their responsibility, as if it is someone else's, and then we basically clean up our city and throw it there. So that's again something very, because unless that mindset changes through use of policy, through outreach, through changing, I mean, we talk about public outreach, but actually we have to first of all convince the stakeholders who are in the position of decision making at the field level, at the urban local body level, to really get convinced about it. So I think this is something which is very important in our opinion, we'll be carrying forward. Sanitation will be, city-wide sanitation will be a very, very important part of the urban river management plan, apart from looking at maybe more actively about the floodplain conservation and also wetland and water body conservation. I need not highlight so much about water body's importance, but yes, that's something again important, because as you mentioned about assimilation, capacity of the river is coming down. So we have to be very clear about the sanitation, but ultimately we have to also bring back more water in the river. It's a long-term thing, but actually we have to work on that direction, and that also we'll have to do it. So these are some of the things which I thought, and then I will end it, like many of you also said, collaboration. Cleaning of river Ganga and all its tributaries is such a massive work with so many things. I didn't talk about the biodiversity, about afforestation, about so many other things we are doing, but we really hope and we really like that more and more people join this, and then more and more partners come and join this movement. This workshop has been really very good for us, because I came to know so many other very, very capable and expert organizations and our partners, and then we really look forward to carrying forward this dialogue and our approach of working together so that this mission really succeeds. As I said, this is such a mighty river, such a big river, 43–45% of the national population is in this basin. So I think if it succeeds, many of the things will succeed and many of our goals of SDG achievement will also be possible. So that's why I look forward to working with many of you and carrying forward this mission. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajiv Ranjanji, for sharing the vision and the commitment and the actions which Namami Gange program is taking under your leadership. I would like to take 2 minutes to give you a background that, CSC's association in assisting Ministry of Urban Development, which was previously now Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. It's a decade ago, sir, we were designated a Center for Excellence for supporting ministry in the reform agenda. And I should tell you that in 2009, Ministry had commissioned that CSC should help them prepare the policy guidance note for septage management. And I'm very happy to say that, but it took a decade that based on that policy guidance note which was provided by CSC, Ministry came out with a technical advisory note for mainstreaming fecal sludge management, supporting cities and states to prepare agenda for fecal sludge management. Then many more actors started joining in, and then now it's a policy. And there are many more players who have come, and we see that 9 states have state policies on fecal sludge management, and agenda has come at the forefront. So for making this, focus move from sewage to sanitation, that was one of the goals, and it has taken a decade, and Ministry has been instrumental in this. That is one. And the move within this, when earlier focus was on ODF, and in between there was review opportunity, then talking about ODF++, it still shows Ministry's commitment. We are aware of that. So in this aspect where CSC was asked by Ministry to help them, we were also helping Ministry develop an agenda on water efficiency, conservation, and other things. So we have assisted in preparing toolkits. We have been doing capacity building, and I think the School of Water and Waste is one direction in that, whereby we will be building capacity of urban local bodies, address these reform agenda which is taking place, the policy reforms through various programs and all those things. It will require people at the 4,000 urban local bodies which will have to address this and build this. So the School of Water and Waste, which is bringing together this conclave, we look forward to Durga Shankar Mishra ji, who is the Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, to give a keynote, a chief guest address to this gathering, sir. And we would like to say, we're right on time, so don't worry. We have 1:30 we had promised, and so if you can address and encourage the participants and tell us the commitment from the Ministry on this. Thank you, sir. Please come.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Sunita Narayanji, the Director General of Center for Science and Environment, the dignitaries on the dais, and all the participants in this 3 days SFD week, which is focused on a very, very important topic, affordable and sustainable citywide sanitation for all. At the outset, let me first thank Sunita ji for inviting me to this beautiful, serene environment. Away from Delhi, I'm sure the air quality index must be very, very fine here. The sight all around is so beautiful. It's especially maybe in the month of September, October, post rains, this must be a beautiful place to come and stay here. So you're all blessed to spend 3 days here in this surrounding, and I'll have to rush back for a meeting at 5 o'clock, which I cannot afford to miss. So I'll have to immediately after this, I'll have to move at whatever speed I can do so that I'm there for the meeting at 5 o'clock. Anyway, so Sunita ji, so thanks a lot for inviting me to this institute. Also, let me thank you for showing me the facilities over here. I mean, this institute is unique in itself. For the first time, I mean, I was seeing a laboratory fully dedicated to fecal and sludge management. I mean, it is studying on this. We have smaller labs, they are working on various different aspects of the fecal sludge, but complete solution for this, a kind of a nested laboratory. I am sure this is the accredited laboratory, which I forgot to ask, and I requested, what's his name? Chandrabhushan. Mr. Chandrabhushan, various things, our conversation, there are a lot of things which you can do. And what you can do, especially in terms of affordability and the sustainability. These are the two key terms which I think you should address for the next 3 days. We do a lot of things. Not that we have not done things, we have done plenty of things, but what we forget, the affordability and the sustainability. If this becomes the focus, then this is going to really change the way this country should change into the new India, the Prime Minister's dream. The new India is nothing but an India of a different kind. India which will address its issues on its own in a different way. This is affordable and sustainability. You can come out with tools, you can have various kinds of tests, quality checks done at different places. You don't require experts, you don't require things to go to the laboratories. You can run your toolboxes, your kits, and the usage should be so simple that can be used anywhere, and it will make people aware of what can be done. In fact, I find the best thing to learn from for us in our, improving our quality of life is the nature. I heard experts from IWA, experts from WRC, from GIZ, and all of them were talking about the cycles, water cycle, different kind of cycles. The best example is the nature. Nature does not throw any waste. It's always circular. It's a complete consumer. Whatever is produced is consumed by somebody, and ultimately it comes back to the same thing. Whether it is the water cycle, food cycle, nitrogen cycle, you take any cycle, nature gives you the best example. Everything is continuously linked to each other. It is all in a circular. We talk about circular economy. Circular example, best examples are there in the nature. So, and that when you see this circularity of the nature, then you start addressing issues. Then fecal, sludge, septage, anything that is all circular. The way Sunita ji in her presentation prepared how the nitrogen coming through our food, the nutrients coming through our food, going to the sludge and septage, going to the nutrients, coming back to the food, back to us. This is the circularity, and we can make the most efficient use of the resources which the nature God has given to us. In fact, we have started understanding these important aspects post 2014, when the Honorable Prime Minister, for the first time, a Prime Minister of the country had the guts and the courage to speak from the ramparts of the Red Fort and say that we will make the country completely clean. Yes, this must have required so much of courage and conviction in him when the whole world, whole country was questioning him. People had doubts. Because we have heard from the ramparts of Red Fort, this is an annual ritual which happens every year, and the Prime Minister speaks from there. And they speak and make various announcements. And here was a Prime Minister who said, we will make country completely clean by the year 2019, when we go to celebrate 150th anniversary of Mahatma, for whom cleanness was more important than even the independence for which he fought all his life, the freedom. Today, when we look back, almost 5 years back, August 2014, and now we are in the month of April 2019, I don't think any Indian, any segment of the country has got any kind of doubt that we can't make it. Now everybody feels that we can make it. Let me tell you, in my ministry, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Based on the 2011 census, the records which you get, we got nearly 12.6% people still using open, going for defecation outside. We estimated the total number of toilets, individual toilets we had to construct was around 66 lakhs. 6.6 million for the foreign dignitaries who are here, but I think they understand this lakhs and crore because they told that they've been visiting India, so they must be aware of our numerical system. 66 lakhs toilet was supposed to be constructed. Today I can say with confidence we have already done 63 lakhs. 95% toilets already done. We thought, we calculated what was the gap in the community and the public toilets. The gap was nearly 5.2 lakhs. We have already done 5.4 lakhs, more than that. More than 100% public toilet, the community toilets we have done. But is that all? No. One, just constructing toilet is not enough. We should also change behavior so that people should start using the toilet. You should also make sure the toilets are such, it used to be a common sight. Not that the toilets were not there. Toilets were there in the public places. It was a common sight, people defecating outside the toilet and not inside the toilet. Why? The toilets were not clean. So we thought, now we have come up to that level, go for ODF plus. Make sure there is a water, there is a hygiene, there is a cleanness in the toilet so that people use it. Also there is enough of campaign so that people are use it. They understand what is the difference, how it is going to harm them if we defecate outside and not use the toilet. So there's a huge campaign. Swachhta selfie, if you are aware, you might be hearing on the All India radio, or various kinds of campaign where you have utilized the public leaders, the public figures, whether they are in the film, they are in the literature, they are in the sports field, they are the politics, they are into the religion, they are into the any kind of field. Those who matter most in the public, we have utilized them as a Swachhagrahis. They have donated freely their time towards campaign and towards making the changing the behavior of the people so that they use these toilets. So we went for ODF plus, but again we thought it is not satisfied. It is not enough. Just keeping the toilets clean, keeping hygiene is not enough. We also need to tell people that where the toilets are. Because if you are, going to the toilet is a natural urge, which all of us, nobody can avoid. It's a part of the nature. It's a nature of our nature. Then we had tie-up with the Google. And we have gone in a big way to the Google locator. Today, I can say 1,400 cities, more than 42,000 toilets are on the Google locator. You can use your mobile phone, just click, you have the Google locator, you know where the nearest toilet is. And you can also mark that you are satisfied, unsatisfied, you are not, you had a good feeling. Also you can grade them, and all this is being converged at one place, and we can utilize that. We are utilizing that for improving the quality of the toilets. Again, we were not satisfied. We want to go for ODF plus plus. Because the toilet, as Sunita ji said in her presentation, that the toilet, it is a containing all the human sludge, urine and all those things, it is containing at one place. But how this is being disposed of? The report, let me congratulate you again for your very good report which I read on the way from Delhi to this place. I was also visiting some of the place, you may be aware, Delhi to Alwar. We are going to have a regional rapid transport. For the first time in our country, our Prime Minister recently laid foundation for a regional rapid transport from Meerut to Delhi. A distance of nearly 82 kilometers will be covered in just 49 minutes, stopping at 16 places. So people need not stay in Delhi, they can stay 50 kilometers away, 70 kilometers away, and every day they can commute, come and go back from Delhi in a very short period, as much time as they take within the city of Delhi. So similar kind of a regional rapid transport we are going to have Delhi to Alwar, and I have the MD of the National Regional Transport Corporation, Mr. Vinay Kumar Singh, we were coming on the way, and that's why I took a longer route to inspect all those places, what we are going to do. The new, this new DPR is going to be finalized very soon, and we'll work on that. So I was saying this ODF plus plus. ODF plus plus is all the toilet we have constructed. Few of them are connected to the sewer system, maybe around 20%. But the balance 80%, what do you do to them? Such large scale 63 lakhs toilets plus 5 lakhs is nearly 70 lakhs toilets have been constructed in the last 4 or 5 years. So all that sludge and septage which is going to be there, where it is going to go? It may go to the drain. And the problem which was going to create through the open defecation, that is only temporarily addressed. It is not addressed for all the time. We need to address them fully. And that is possible only if you go for fecal, sludge and septage management. Proper way of emptying these toilets, emptying these tanks, proper way of transporting it to the right place, proper way of or scientifically treating those things, and then utilizing what you are coming out of it, the water which is coming out of it, the solid waste which comes out of it, how to utilize that, this becomes a major challenge. So whether through the septage or through the FSSM, this has to be addressed. And let me tell you, when we were designing these norms, the benchmarks for the ODF++, we had a very detailed discussion. I mean, I think you also participated, I mean, the various organizations have participated in it. And today, during the Swachh Sarvechan 2019, I think it was mentioned by Madhu. It was mentioned by Madhu, who are our very active partner in the Swachh Bharat mission. Mentioned by her that various parameters have been included in the Swachh Sarvechan 2019. And the result is 376 cities across the country, they have been achieved the status of ODF+. 167 of them have attained the status of ODF++. And large number of applications are there. This assessment is already going on. But again, we are not happy. We are part of the New India. And New India is aspiring India. New India is to make the country the best India. I mean, provide the best quality of life to our citizens. So, after this Swachh Sarvechan, we have started working on the third level, and that is ODF safe level. I mean, I have had a couple of meetings with my team where we have been discussing what all benchmarks we need to put so that it becomes completely sustainable. Like for the garbage, I mean, like this ODF is one concern, garbage is another big concern for the cities. And for the garbage, we came with a protocol called garbage-free cities. We want to rate the cities at 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 5 star, 7 star. Today we already have, when we have a city has reached to a level of 7 star, it's a completely sustainable and clean city. So far, none of the cities across the country have achieved the 7 star, but we have 3 cities which have achieved 5 star, and I can challenge, you can visit one of them, any of them, and you will find the kind of cleanness you have, it can compare with any part of the world. One of the cities is Indore, where we had this 3-hour international conference, and in the 3-hour international conference, people from 52 countries participated. The Japanese minister, he said, I had not thought I'll see an Indian city like this. That was when he was addressing, the minister from Japan was addressing in that 3-hour conference. He said, I had not expected, it was beyond my imagination that city will be so clean. In fact, he mentioned that he has gone in the night also and seen across the city, and he found it was absolutely clean. Still, it is only a 5 star. We have got 1 to 7 star, and now some of the cities have started aspiring for 7 star. This is the transformation. This is the transformation. So I'm again thankful to you, Sunita ji. I got such a good exposure. I mean, hearing to Arne, his whole concept of the SIT flow diagram. In fact, I was wondering, this SFD when I was reading, it was not written anywhere. I was just trying to guess what could it be. It is a sanitation flow diagram or something like this. Till I heard here, it is a sit flow diagram. To be very clear, I mean your Excreta Matters, it's a direct attack. And you see, when you speak like this, it is directly touching your heart. And you want to address that. Those sit flow diagrams, if a concept given by you, wonderful concept, sit flow diagram, and it is, in fact, when I was reading her book on management of septage in Uttar Pradesh, I was going through the 4 different kinds of categorization of, because I come from the Uttar Pradesh cadre, and I know my state very well, more than most other will know, because I have spent almost more than 20 years of my career in my state. And beyond that, I am born also from Uttar Pradesh. I am born and brought up in Uttar Pradesh. So I have a much more exposure of that. I could understand, appreciate all those. And it gives you a very good idea. Not only, I mean, you can prepare any kind of flow diagram. The flow diagram should convert into the action. It should lead to action. It should lead to some transformation. And it gives you, the moment it gives you the clear idea of where you are, then you start addressing. In fact, diagnosis is more important than cure. Sometimes people start the cure without even understanding what the ailment is. And then you start hitting, like he says, hitting in the dark, and you have all kinds of solutions. A better way is to diagnose it. And once you diagnose it, what kind of ailment is there, what kind of problem is there, you can definitely address it more effectively, in a much more efficient way, much shorter way, much cheaper way, and we can't afford, we don't have the luxury of having access, we can't afford time or resources or anything. So this sit flow diagram, so congratulations to you, sir, very nice. It's a wonderful concept, and it should be prepared for, I mean, once you have this sit flow diagram, it could be started like we have got the city sanitation plan. In our Atal Mission, Amrit scheme, we got the, every city we prepared a complete plan of their complete infrastructure. So this helps you in understanding. Once you understand, you can address the problem, and I think presently in our country, the way things are moving, everything is quite positive. We are working like a team India, where the national government, the federal government, the state government, the local government, this kind of, because I can say with my experience of behind around 35 years of service in the state government and central government, this kind of positivity and approach to address issues was never there. This kind of a positivity and address, because everything is moving in a much more faster way. And I think this kind of a workshop is a result of that kind of positivity across the country. We need to address that. One important aspect, I think, in different presentations we missed. When we are talking about FSSM versus sewerage, because traditionally we have heard from our colonial days of the sewerage system. All old cities like the Kent of Delhi, Kent of Kanpur, Kent of Lucknow, all these old cities where the British used to live, they had the sewerage system. And there was a sewerage treatment plant, and the sewerage treatment plant of different kind of technology. There is various technology. FSSM seems to be the new addition. But the beauty of FSSM is, if the sewerage treatment plant and the sewer system, the sewer network cost you around 10,000 to 15,000 rupees per person, FSSM costs you 200 to 300 per person. The cost is almost 5% of the cost of the sewerage system. Now if you want to, you see our figure of 2014 when we started doing this Amrut, when we were doing the planning of the Amrut, there our first target is to address water issue universally. 100% by end of when the Amrut scheme closes in March 2020, every household must have a clean water tap. And if it is not possible to have it every house within 50 meter, he should have, this is right to have a 50 meter, within 50 meter, there should be water tap so that he can collect the water from there. We wanted to address the sewer system, and the sewer system at that time, I'm not saying the uses, I'm saying the connectivity, the total sewer system availability was around 32%. Yes. With all stretching all the resources, you know that out of 77,640 crore rupees which you have sanctioned under the Amrut on the projects, nearly 31,000 plus has gone on the sewer and septic management. It's around 42% goes on the sewer and septic management. And with that we will be able to achieve only around 61 to 62%. So we'll add another 30%. It's a long way to go. But if you are addressing the whole thing just through the sewer system, possibly our achievement would have been from 32% to maybe 42%. What we have done, out of this 31,000 plus on the sewer and septic management, nearly 8,000 crore is dedicated to FSSM, fecal and sludge and septic management. Total 446 projects across the country are on fecal, sludge and septic management. Because we can cover much longer distance using this. It's a much cheaper system, much more affordable, much easier to implement than the sewer and septic management. In the sewer and septic management, only 2 days back I was in Kanpur. In fact, what Rajiv mentioned about the Sisamo, I went and saw that Sisamo. I mean, we were both educated in Kanpur, and I was also posted in Kanpur as the Vice Chairman of the Development Authority. I went to see that Sisamo, how it is going to Jhajmau and how it is going to Bingama. But also, what I was told, in a lot of sewer systems, you get a sewer here, you get a sewer here, and there's no connectivity. No. So once the water, the wastewater starts flowing, it starts flowing out. It's all underground system, invisible, unless and we keep the whole track. It's so many things, so many challenges are there. Unlike FSSM, where the responsibility is that of the individual, who is constructing a toilet, he also has to construct the safety tank. And then for emptying and taking it, transporting it elsewhere, it may be done by the corporation, but also in today's kind of a positive environment we have across the country, we have got a lot of appetite in the private sector. The whole activity can be outsourced. It can give so much of employment. Maybe our own sanitation workers can make a society, and that society can take up this responsibility. They get this. Now new technologies are coming up. I mean, I've seen in various things, they can take it up. Like Madhu was there in Bhubaneswar, in Puri, when we had this workshop on FSSM. She was very much there. So they can, I mean, this whole thing can be taken up by a society, and they can be funded on a viable funding model. Now this can be treated, only the treatment remains the responsibility of the municipality. See, the cost has been divided. Cost has been divided. It is a much more sustainable model for a country like ours than a model where you are making a huge investment into underground making sewer system, and that too long, I mean taking a long distances, and then you have the STP and you got a problem like what Rajiv was saying, that only it is being used for 20% of the capacity. That has been the story throughout. So how we can do it? Now the question is how you can further make it affordable and sustainable. That's the challenge. That's the challenge. You can address it. Well, there is a learning curve. There is a good amount of enthusiasm towards this. When we had this national workshop on FSSM, there is a huge participation across the country. And let me inform you, it is not only the 9 states, now 19 states have their own policy. They have their action plan. We have a large scale participation in the FSSM. Everybody wants to go for it, and go for it not as a temporary measure, but as a permanent measure. well, this becomes a very important solution, especially in the non-core areas of the city. In the core of the city where the population density is very high, maybe you can go for a sewer system. But a non-core area, which is coming up the upcoming area, which is the urban sprawling area, that area is completely uneconomical to have that kind of a sewer system. You need to have what Sunita ji mentioned very nicely about the mobile versus landline. Mobile versus landline. I mean, if you start moving the landline, I mean, how many connections and how long you can keep giving the wire, and they think of the kind of maintenance problem. Somebody comes and cuts. When used to be the district magistrate or something, we used to have a lot of problems and protests around this. The telephone has gone because somebody was digging the road and some wire got cut in that road, and it's very difficult to take. For next 7 days, no telephone. Now with this mobility, with the mobile application, you can do anywhere, and still the mobile is on. So I think that was a very good example you gave. So I think you have a wonderful, exciting next 3 days. One, enjoying the nature. Maybe the evening, I mean, right now during the day, it may be slightly warm. The evenings will be definitely cold and nice. And I can also see in your program that there are certain culture programs. Maybe the state of Rajasthan is full of culture. It is, I mean, we say, very culturally rich state. So you will enjoy that. But definitely you should go into, because I can see a lot of experts here. We have a municipal commissioner. Only last week I was there in a city, visiting a city, and people with expertise, people have knowledge, people have got technical skills. So you can come out with something, what she said, the complete solution. In that week, starting from containment, that itself is a big challenge, because containment needs a technological change. And not only technological change, even the skill improvement. I mean, we come out with a good technology, and we forget that technology will be translated without understanding that technology has to be skilled. People need to get fully skilled so they can use the technology. In fact, I was in a meeting in Copenhagen and met with an expert. He said he was doing some, I mean, I will not mention the name of the city, studying the water issues there, and he said water leakage was almost 40% because people who are giving the connection of water, they don't know how to do the connection. Maybe when we gave the connection, at that time it was all right. But slowly it started leaking out, and 30 to 40% water leaks out. So is the case even with the containment, the septic tank which you make, it is not properly. So how you can do, what you can do for skilling, that is another area to address. Then emptying, transporting, treating, and using the whole thing, so that the learning from the nature of being the circularity, this circularity comes into force. I think that is the challenge before this August gathering, who have come from with their skills and expertise and experience from different parts of the country and also from different parts of the world. I will be very happy if Sunita ji shares with me all that, after the 3 days churning, all that great ideas which come. If that is shared with us, it will help us in the policy making. It will help us in the policy making, because my ministry is fully geared to address the solution. We have absolutely, with Prime Minister Modi's kind of commitment and moving towards the new India, an India of possibilities, an India of opportunities, an India of giving everybody's opportunity to do their best, and moving from the 3 trillion economy to the 5 trillion economy to the 10 trillion economy, and becoming an important player across the globe. We are all for it. We are all going to work for it. And I think your contribution is, through this workshop, is going to help us making our policies move. Again, to end it, let me thank Sunita ji and her team. I don't know many of them, because I have met her a couple of times. I don't know many of them, but I'm sure all of you are fully involved in the whole thing. So let me thank all of you for giving this opportunity. Thanks a lot and all the very best for the next 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Durga Shankarji, for this very strong commitment being demonstrated here with your address. I would fail in my duty, Durga Shankarji, when you use the word team. I would like to take a couple of seconds to just say the SFD team. We had 15-member team from CSC and 15 interns, young people who passed out from colleges, did their masters. They didn't know that if they map shit flows, what will they achieve? And today they can. So can you stand off the interns who joined hands to go 90 days, 66 cities, and 30-member team? And this is the impact. So these are the young fellows. And we had 2 program managers, Bitush and Rahul here, who spearheaded this. In just 90 days, sir, this report was completed. It was monsoons, I can tell you, and you know your state very well. The small and medium towns in which they had to go knee-deep water and collect this data and present it to you. In October, the first preliminary results were provided to you, and now we have completed all 66. So in 90 days, 30 people, hats off to my team, and congratulations. Thanks a lot to all the team members. And we have some of the minds behind this tool. Andy, you are hiding there. So Andy, and these are the people who have generated, who have put the brains behind how this tool works. So maybe you can stand up, Andy, we should see him. So Andy, so it was the global partners who came together. Fantastic job. Thank you very much. We have in this room people from US, Rwanda, Ghana, I should say a dozen countries here. If I don't name them, just don't say that I'm not thanking. I thank you all for coming all the way from different parts of the world, and also within India from different parts. People as far as Tumkur, Kannur, South, and within UP also from small towns and who have come here. And I should also tell you that this entire program was being web streamed, live telecast. So people who could not make it here could also listen to what was being talked here, and the message is quite clear that ministry is committed and CSC is committed to assisting ministry and working with the ministry, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is supporting this initiative, and alliance members who are here, want to take this journey to the next level, and we want to see that in coming 1 or 2 years we have commitment to it. Thank you very much. So, thank you people on the dais, all the chief guests and the members from the global community who have come and addressed the audience. We thank you all for sparing time, coming all the way from all different, and I would request you to just stand up for a group photograph before we disperse here. And there will also be a group photograph with the entire people in the group outside just the hall. So we will have a group photograph before we disperse for the lunch here now with the people here. Projector band kar diye? Haan. Vitush, you can also join, please join, because aap log hain.